Wow. What a piece of information. I am Marianne Sullivan. I'm a member of the Committee on Energy, Agriculture, and the Environment for the League of Women Voters of New York State. Beth Rado is the head of that committee. She's testified it earlier today. And I wanted to read what we wrote, the League of Women Voters of New York State, to Joe Martins, as you know who he is, at New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And it has to do with the uranium primarily, but let us begin with the beginning. I want to reiterate that on June 27, 2012, the Times Union reported that emails obtained under the Freedom of Information Act by the Environmental Working Group revealed that the Council for DEC provided to counsel to the oil and gas industry the exclusive opportunity to preview and comment on regulations for hydraulic fracturing before they were released to the public. According to the chronology provided by EWG on September 26, 2011, 2 days before the DEC went public with its proposed regulations, Albany-based attorney Chesapeake Energy Thomas West wrote DEC regulators to make, quote, one last pitch, unquote, to, quote, reduce or eliminate radionuclide testing, unquote, of fluids that storms could wash away from drilling sites. EWG went on to state that because drilling industry representatives were the only stakeholders to see the draft regulatory language before it was published on September 28, 2011, EWG could not determine whether West's pitch caused the DEC to soften its approach to the issue of radioactive pollution. While the September 28th version of the Stormwater General Permit requires testing for radioactive contaminants, it does not propose penalties for drilling companies whose runoff shows radioactivity at a level of concern for public health, or even specify what level the DEC considers unsafe. On June 2011, the League of Women Voters of New York State sent a letter to the DEC, a copy of which is attached, supplementing its comments to the draft SGI submitted on December 20, 2009, to reflect the results of a study reported on October 25, 2010 by the University of Buffalo, reporting that researchers found hydraulic fracturing also causes uranium, a naturally occurring radionuclide that is naturally trapped inside Marcellus Shale, to be released, raising additional environmental concerns. According to Assistant Professor Tracy Bank, this research revealed that Marcellus Shale naturally traps metals such as uranium at higher levels than usually found naturally, but lower than man-made contamination levels. Bank and her colleagues addressed the question of whether drilling and pumping millions of gallons of water into the underground rocks would force the uranium into the soluble base and mobilize it. They had further investigated whether uranium would show up in groundwater. Bank and her colleagues found that uranium and the hydrocarbons, or the natural gas, are in the same physical space. We found they are not just physically, but also chemically bound. This article also notes that when millions of gallons of water used in hydraulic fracturing come back to the surface, it could contain uranium contaminants, potentially polluting streams and other ecosystems and generating hazardous waste. Bank went on to state, even though at these levels uranium is not a radioactive risk, it is still a toxic, deadly metal. In the attached letter, the League referenced Environmental Conservation Law Article 22, enacted in 1983, which prohibits the mining of uranium within the state because it might pose danger. The League asked the DEC to consider, before issuance of the SGICE, the apparent inconsistency between the scientific determination that New York has high levels of uranium. The natural gas hydrocarbons and uranium are chemically bound, and the express prohibition from the New York legislature against mining of uranium within our state, on the one hand, and New York's potential embrace of high-volume hydraulic fracturing on the other. A company drilling for shale gas need not intend to mine for uranium to unearth more than trace amounts or introduce the potential risks addressed by this statute. The League did not receive a direct response to its request for reconciliation of this apparent inconsistency, nor was it addressed in the draft of the SGICE. The League renews its request for the DEC to reconcile the still unresolved inconsistency that now extends to regulations that propose no penalties for drilling companies whose runoff shows radioactive activity at a level of concern for public health, instead of affirming the precautionary intent of ECL Article 22. The League of Women Voters supports transparency in government. This includes equitable treatment of all citizens in lawmaking process, particularly when, as in this instant case, the public health, safety, and the environmental costs associated with hydraulic fracturing may be at taxpayers' expense. We thank you for your consideration and look forward to your response. We have had no response. Okay, this is for you.
Copies of your testimony, especially to Jeff.
I gave them to Rebecca.
Thanks for your testimony. Again, you brought up a very good, interesting issue as part of this overall problem. And I wasn't aware of the concentrations until you mentioned them.
Well, it's an issue that isn't going to go away until the radon goes away, and it's not going away any other way than radioactive decay. And if we don't look at this, we're going to see a dramatic change in the lung cancer levels in the city. Now, fortunately, this Marcellus gas isn't getting to the city yet, but the pipelines are being constructed now, the interconnections are being now, that is going to bring this gas to this marketplace. And because it's the closest marketplace, it's going to be natural for this to be expanding in the gas supply of the New York City. Mayor Bloomberg wants to replace fuel oil with natural gas in order to reduce asthma in the city. A great idea, but let's not replace it with radioactive natural gas that's going to cause lung cancer. Thank you.
Thank you.